model. And we're actually, as TechSmith, I'll be interested in following your journey and hearing how it goes, because I think models like this could be interesting for us too, as a way to connect with people and customers in different places. So it's a pretty cool thing, and I hadn't ever thought of using the Microsoft stores this way. So kudos to you guys for doing something that's pretty cutting edge.
Are you sharing?
Right, so do you want to? Yeah, you probably want to make me the presenter, or I guess I don't have to be made the presenter. Let's see, what do we got here? I will share my screen.
Click the icon. Right, there you go.
All right, and then it's probably going to go the wrong way around, but we will flip it here. So yeah, this is the topic I want to talk to you all about. As TJ mentioned, I work for TechSmith. What I do now is actually work on strategy and understanding trends among our key audiences, trends in the industry, trying to understand deeply some of the challenges that people have who are creating technical content. And then obviously, being on a product team, what opportunities would we have to try to come alongside and find new, interesting, and valuable problems to solve for folks, because that's obviously, we as a vendor are making a product that if it doesn't solve problems, people don't want to exchange money for it, and we're interested in staying in business. So as TJ mentioned, well, just I guess a little bit about me. So yeah, I've been with TechSmith for quite some time. I started out doing a lot of content actually in my career. So I did a lot of blogging to start out with, and some marketing writing. I wrote for videos. We would do sort of these blended videos that were somewhat marketing to get attention for features, but also somewhat focused on helping people actually use and get value from those. And been involved in a number of different content efforts over the years. Now I'm on the product side. A little bit about me personally. I love traveling internationally when I get a chance. Took a bunch of weeks off, cashed in all of my paid time off last year, took my family to China for 5 weeks. That's my crew there, and we had a really great time, learned a lot, and it was just eye-opening to visit this amazing country of contrast. And I also got to travel to Israel. So there's a really vibrant TechCom community in Jerusalem and in Israel generally, Tel Aviv, but they have a conference in Jerusalem called MegaCom, and I got invited to speak there and was able to do that. And then I tacked on a couple days and did some motorcycle touring. Israel, fantastic country. This view is out over the Lake of Galilee, and I had a really nice time just motoring around there. The products that we make, Snagit and Camtasia, as TJ mentioned, these are ones that get a lot of attention among technical communicators. The Content Wrangler does this really great benchmarking survey. If you haven't looked at it, do visit their site and check that out. There's a lot of good information there. And some of it was actually shared at one of the closing sessions at STC Summit in Denver this year. But Snagit's on that list, Camtasia's on that list. And really what their purpose is, or what they help people do, is create visual content. So we're talking about images and videos and animated GIFs, all of this kind of rich visual content. And the tools and functionality to create this kind of stuff has gotten cheaper and easier over the years. And so I would think, well, it's just a no-brainer. Everybody would have visuals in their content, but yet sometimes we'll see, content that looks kind of like this. It's just all text, and there may be reasons for that. We're going to talk about some of those today, but I really want to bring you this message of you don't have to settle. You don't have to compromise for content that is just text and has no visuals. There are ways to do both. And so I want to talk to you about some research today that we were involved in that helps establish this idea that visuals do matter, and they matter to your customers. And then share some ideas for how you can creatively approach the task of creating and updating and maintaining, visuals over time in your content, because it is not free. We don't get that for free. So how do we make that more approachable for everybody? So kind of the twin ideas are: the first, you can't afford not to have visuals in your content, and the second is how to afford to have visuals in your content. That's kind of another way to restate the 2 points. So first off, tackling this question of do visuals matter? And it's an important question that we actually take seriously. We don't want to just take for granted. We're in the business of visual creation tools, but we looked around for what research was out there that actually helped establish with real scientific rigor this idea that visuals are helpful in technical communication. And there wasn't much good research out there, so we actually footed the bill to have a study done. And we had it independently conducted so that we could preserve objectivity in the study. And it certainly could have turned out differently, and there could have been other results than what we found. But it did have some useful and informative findings that I want to share with you today. So first, a quick note about the methodology for those who are interested in this, how we went about doing the research project. There is a link at the end of the talk to a full white paper that you can download and check out that has more citations and more information in it. But just at a high level, so there were really 3 parts to this research. The first was an opinion survey. It was fairly broad, a good number of folks, knowledge workers from all around the world, a number of different global areas. And it was really focused on what kinds of methods of communication these folks used at home and at work, and what their opinions about what kind of communication works best for them. And particularly, if they're receiving training at work, what kind of communication do they find most effective? So this is really about attitudes and perception of knowledge workers. Then there was actually a component that was a scientific study, an observational study where people were brought into the lab. So there were 125, a smaller group for this, but still a pretty significant number there. And they had one of 3 different tasks and were given one of 3 different types of instructions to complete the task. So they had to do something like, upload a post or fill out an expense form, and then they were given either text-only instructions or text that was paired with illustrative screenshots, to kind of show you how to do each step, or a video that had a voiceover that kind of narrated through. And then there was a doctor present who was measuring things like the different outcomes, like what is their ability to understand the tasks and the instructions, how well were they able to actually recall information, and then how quickly could they fill out or do this task, accomplish the task. So there's sort of these outcomes that we were looking for that map pretty closely to the kind of outcomes you probably think about in your own either instructional content, documentation, if you're doing e-learning or training, that kind of thing. It's gonna be something along these lines. How well are people actually to perform the task, how quickly, and how well can they recall it later. Then there was a third component to the study which really took some of these outcomes and tried to multiply them out by things like economic factors like GDP, or the amount of time that the average knowledge worker spends consuming content, average worker productivity, and that kind of thing. And then also looked at that by each of those global regions to try to understand what is the economic impact or result of these kind of findings of using visuals in content. So 3 big takeaways from this research project. The first is that people do indeed have a strong preference for visual forms of communication. Sometimes folks will debate this back and forth. Well, do people actually like videos? I don't like videos. I don't want to learn by video. Well, it turns out that, by and large, folks out there do appreciate having these more visual forms of communication when they're given information that's important for their productivity. But most workplaces actually fail at delivering information in the format and the form that people really prefer. So we took a look at millennials first and kind of sliced by that group. And before, you roll your eyes or think, oh gosh, millennials, just a quick rundown of who are the millennials today. They're workers under 40. They're kind of no longer the new kids on the block. They're actually the largest demographic, and they're growing, and they're becoming, or soon will become, the largest group within the current workforce. So the majority of your coworkers and or your customers will be millennials if they're not already. That'll happen soon. So just with that in mind, then thinking about, okay, well, what are those preferences? Certainly a strong preference for image and image-based kind of content and tools, video, and then also even animated GIFs registers on the radar here. And you'll see, if you look around at different brands and the way they're doing content today, they often have a blend of these three types of formats in their technical content. And then you think, okay, what about the broader group, the non-millennials, if you will, and I'm in that group as well. And the trend is still there. It's not quite as strong, but there is still a preference for video, and about a third of folks said, yeah, I actually like text with images that will help illustrate. These are marked up screenshots or annotated screenshots. And then there is a group that said, nope, just give me the text. Just plain old email is fine for me, and that'll be sufficient. So one of the things to think about here is why does this matter? Why does your customer's preference or your colleague's preference actually matter when it comes to content? Why not just give them what's easiest to create and let them deal with it? We recently, I'm part of a group that's doing some work around onboarding for our own products, and we surveyed our own customers about their preferences for learning recently, and it was really kind of, I work for a company that makes video creation software, so I bought in, but I was actually surprised at the really strong preference that our customers had for learning via videos. And they were just it was there was almost no number two. It was number one, video, and a distant second was everything else. And why is that? Well, I think that a lot of us, we're just used to kind of Googling for help when we have a question. And what often comes up there is video content or other sort of visual content. And so that's what we gravitate to. And then if you think more broadly, so what is the point I'm making? That your customers, your colleagues have a choice. When they Google for something related to your product, it's not just your content that comes up. It's anyone who's made content that's related or that Google thinks is related. And so if your content isn't showing up and isn't the most visual stuff on the results page, often you'll be overlooked and they'll go somewhere else to try to answer their questions and not use your content at all, which is kind of a shame because you probably have the most up-to-date, accurate, and best content out there. So then also just think about the way that the perception of the content also bleeds over into the perception of your product as a whole. So it's kind of part and parcel of your brand. That brand experience is not just the product, it's also all the documentation and content and training material that comes with it. So an unattractive set of content is going to kind of lead to this idea that it's an unattractive product or service. Okay, so the second finding, does visual content actually help people perform the task better? And yes, it does, which is not terribly surprising. There is some older research on this, but we were able to reestablish that this is still definitely true today. So these kind of very common tech tasks that we ask people to do, they were able to absorb the information a bit faster when the communications were visual in nature, and their retention was better, and their completion of tasks was better than if they used when the instructions actually had more of this visual nature to them versus just text alone. So what does this mean to your business? Again, and your content is there. Maybe it helps deflect support calls. Maybe your content is there to help lead to customer success. So retention means fewer repeated calls and tickets and web searches. Better task completion means that more people get the task right the first time with fewer errors and certainly less frustration and more customer success, right? So it's sort of indexed to all of the good things that you're trying to achieve as a technical communicator, and that's great. I also want to point out that in a lot of these cases, the text was important too. It wasn't like there's this dichotomy between text and visuals, they really support each other. So having marked up screenshots plus text is better than text alone, for example. And that's good because a lot of us, a lot of folks here in the room probably make their living writing or at least dealing with words, and words are certainly important in all of the visuals as well as accompanying them. So, and then third, what is the third finding is that there are these economic outcomes that are important too. So we just, like I said, applied some economic factors like GDP and so on and the productivity measures. And if you took those, 6 minutes and 43 seconds that people could save in an average 8-hour workday, if their workplace communications contain more visuals, you multiply that out and it comes to something like 33 minutes a week or 25 hours a year per employee. And then you think about how many employees the company has. A company that has 10,000 employees, that's kind of like getting 140 extra employees for your company for free, just because you have more visual content. So that's kind of an internal workplace measure, but if you think about it from your customers and your colleagues as well, whoever it is that you support with your content, those things do add up. And so helping save people time and helping them work more effectively can lead to some pretty good economic outcomes. So this is the actual doctor who worked on this study for us. He looks the part, which is fantastic. And really this quote is just to note that this trend is sort of going to only continue and only grow in all of our communication that we're experiencing out there, outside of the workplace. There's just a predominance for GIFs and emojis and short videos and infographics and all kinds of visuals that really will continue to drive this trend over time. So all of those, all that data really helps make this case, right? That there's a preference for visuals, and people can actually do their task better if they have some visuals in the content. And then there are these economic outcomes that are consequential as well. But, and I hear, folks in the room probably feeling a little tension because there's this real world we live in where, if I put in screenshots of my product and the interface, that's cool, but that interface is probably going to change in the next, weeks or months or year for sure. And how do I maintain those visuals? And maybe you localize into one or more languages. That Content Wrangler survey found that, a lot of companies, like a third of companies localize, and a third of those are localizing into like more than 10 or 15 languages, if I remember correctly. So it's quite a few. And that can be a real challenge. Maybe you're supporting your product on many different versions and platforms, and so how do you reconcile that in the visuals? Maybe your UI is just a hot mess, and you're like, I don't really want to put that in front of people. The fewer screenshots of it, the better. And then sort of one of these things that we hear too is, I work on some kind of a cloud-based platform, and my developers won't let me near it to set up a dummy instance with, dummy data. And so it's a real challenge to get at the product early enough and with kind of some window dressing on it to make it look realistic in my content. So these are common problems, and we definitely hear these from folks. And it's not just technical communicators, right? So where you sit in an org as a tech communicator, there's someone else on the other, maybe on the other side of the wall or the other side of the company who's doing similar work but in a marketing context. And they may also have to show the product in various states and in the content. And so one of the things that I love doing in my role is I get to observe what's happening in other disciplines and kind of where can we take some of those things that are happening over here and see how they're relevant over there within another group, because our products are used very horizontally by lots of different people across an organization. So I started observing these kind of emails in my inbox. Wistia was sending them, Asana, Calendly, and what you're noticing in common here is there's this really kind of bold graphical treatment going on where the screenshots are not a literal screenshot, but they look more artistic, more abstracted, and just a little less text in each of those screenshots. And what I've observed is that often marketing teams end up being well equipped with high-end software and with designers who have a lot of expertise and training in making, visual content. And so they're able to sort of lead in some of these trends and in some of these approaches. And that's really what I think is going on here. And it got me asking, so why are they doing this? What's in it for them? Besides maybe it looks cool, is there some other outcome or some other benefit to their team in terms of creating this kind of content? And then something is starting to be really useful when it works its way into the product itself. And this, was little onboarding animations or static onboarding text plus images, graphics, and the same sort of treatment where it looks kind of like a wireframe or something abstract. And then if you go looking, you'll also find it in documentation as well. So this is from Google's website, and what you see here is 3 of the, 20 languages that this article was in, each with the exact same graphics illustrating that step in the content. So English, French, Japanese, but the same graphic across all 3 with this simplified sort of look to it. And that's what we took to calling it. So some of our actually the ones here at TechSmith who coined this phrase were on our user assistance team, and they started looking at this and finding ways to work it into our own content a couple of years ago. And it's this idea of stripping out anything that's unessential or inessential or even distracting within the visual, within the graphic, and then leaving just the relevant and most important elements. So we thought, well, sounds like we can call it Simplified User Interface, and we get to say SUI, which is pretty fun as an acronym, and it's hopefully descriptive of what's happening here. It's taking a user interface, simplifying it down. And so this illustrates really what we're talking about here, right? Which is the screenshot on the left is Calendly, which is a service that is really great, and I promote it even though I have no benefit from doing that. I use it myself to set up appointments with SMEs or with customers and that are outside the company where we don't share a calendar. And then the one on the right is the same interface but abstracted or simplified in this way, the SUI approach applied. And what's cool is that if you do this effect well, you can actually recognize what the interface is pretty easily. So let's quiz ourselves on this. So we'll play Guess That Interface. So this first one, mic is open. Anyone who wants to shout it out? What are we looking at? What application is this?
What is it? The audience is saying File Manager.
Yeah, Windows Explorer or Finder, depending on which operating system you're on. Yeah, for sure. Okay, this one. I think I heard YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure, right? It could be maybe some other video platform, but it's become pretty iconic now, this layout for YouTube. Might be a little harder here, but you probably use this every day.
What is it? Outlook.
Yeah, for sure. On the Mac, you can tell by the little dots in the top left corner. I go back and forth between Mac and Windows, and the location of those little minimize, maximize buttons always, makes me stumble each time. So yeah, this is cool. At a basic level, you can kind of abstract out a lot of the detail, and you can, folks can still recognize what it is. But if you are trying to give people instructions or training or documentation, you need more than that, right? You need them to be able to actually follow along and understand what you're trying to show, the steps that you're trying to teach. So I want to submit to you that it's actually doing a favor to the reader, to the user, to abstract out some of this detail. And we'll use this as a way of illustration. If you just step back and look at all of the things that are on this screen, it's a simple menu, you know, file menu, very, very basic kind of thing. But when you really step back and look at all the words and all the symbols and everything that's here, if I'm just trying to get you to do file, connect mobile device, I have just cluttered this thing up with all kinds of extraneous detail that's not going to help you. So if you simplify that down to its core elements, you're left with file, connect mobile device, and it's very, very clear where I, as the user, am supposed to look at every minute, you know, or every section of that screenshot. So you've really helped me to focus my attention. And then, of course, add some, you know, there will be accompanying text. Either if this is an animation, it'll come as narration, or if it's on a web page or, you know, in a printed guide, it'll be next to it as text. And that helps relay what those steps are. And just if you're thinking right now about accessibility, I got that question recently when I was sharing this information with another audience. And so definitely follow best practices. You know, if you're putting images into a web page, use alt text that describes what's in that graphic. In this case, it's, you know, the file menu and connect mobile device. And you can kind of have a nice little summary of that. Or if it's a video or animation, do the same thing, you know, wherever you can in the caption, in alt text, or in accompanying text, make that accessible as far as what's in the content. But what we're seeing here is that this SUI effect is actually helping that content be more effective because it's focusing attention of the user. And then it has these really nice side benefits for you as the creator or the team creating it and maintaining it, is that you don't have to update that graphic nearly as often because there's less text in it that's likely to change. It's more change resistant. And if you are doing localization, you can either eliminate your localization costs or reduce them significantly. And I've seen some, you know, more and more big brands that are, even in their localized content, they'll have simplified images that have a little bit of English left, but they're in touch with their own customers, and I presume that, you know, those customers around the world are comfortable with having a small amount of English in the UI. If not, then you can either abstract all of the text, or there are also ways that you can kind of automate the translation or localization of the text that's remaining. And then the final benefit here is being able to make sure that there's no personally identifiable information or proprietary information that's kind of leaking out of your organization. And we all know, you know, how important security and privacy is in this day. So let's step back and think, okay, got the concept. Hopefully, you know, those benefits or potential benefits are clear. What are some ways that you might be able to think about, where could I start applying this to some of my content? So as I look across different corpuses of content, here's a few suggestions. So this is from Illustrator. It's actually from the German version, but as you can see, you can kind of follow along anyway. It's showing how to export elements and kind of have this way of exporting them in multiple formats. And so that's very, you know, very visually and very vividly illustrated here. So what is this doing? Well, this is inside their product, and what it's doing is it's giving you basically a high-level overview of an interface or a concept. And so whether you're creating documentation, you're doing onboarding like this, maybe you're creating e-learning content, this simplified approach lets you actually remove a lot of the complexity from the content, which reduces cognitive load, right? Familiar concept. And it's great when you need to give your users like this mental map of like, okay, now I understand how this interface looks, the different parts of the interface, or how this process, the overview of this process is. So I would say, as you think about your content, think about places where you need to maybe give a mental map or an overview, or you're trying to help your users understand the logic behind an interface or a process, and then think about abstracting that, applying this simplified content approach. Another application is, and this is actually borrowed from Microsoft in one of their content pieces for the Edge browser. So they have this drop-down menu, and what is populated in that drop-down menu? If you've ever had to take a screenshot for documentation where you're trying to, do 5 searches so that you can have the last 5 searches show up in a certain way, you know how frustrating and kind of time-consuming that can be. So anything where you have to kind of get your application or product into a particular state, maybe you're illustrating a chat between 2 users and you don't really want to have names and chat information, but you just want to suggest that kind of a thing. It's a great place to think about. Or a storage full state. You don't actually want to have to fill up your hard drive to get that message. You want to just kind of suggest it through a simplified illustration. We have used this at TechSmith ourselves in our documentation. We have Snagit on two platforms, Windows and Mac, and those menus at the right are the actual menus from those products. So as you can see, they're not exactly the same. And so if you're doing the documentation for Snagit and you wanted to show right-click on a selection and choose Edit Text, well, it's not going to be in the same spot, and there's going to be a lot of things that are different between the two applications, or the application on the 2 platforms. So we were able to sidestep those issues by just simplifying it down to this SUIfied version here that you see. And I just want to point out that anytime one of those menu items changes, we don't have to go back and update that screenshot. So it also helps us future-proof content in a really nice way. Another way to potentially start thinking about applying SUI in your content would be, are there ways that you need to show an interaction? Here's a mobile interaction. So I want to show you the content on the screen doesn't matter. What I'm just trying to show you is that on this area, you can swipe and then, look what happens. You're moving forward or backward. This is also from the Microsoft Edge content. Makes it really vivid and kind of memorable. And then this is a little bit higher level thought here, but anywhere that in your content you need, you have some graphics and you need to reduce the visual noise. You just need to remove the distracting elements. And so we got thinking about how would you know if you have helped people to focus more? And one of the ways, again, marketers and others, folks doing usability studies, I heard some information about UX and usability at the top of this hour. And one of the ways that folks do that is with eye tracking software. So, eye tracking software, people wear either a headset or there's a camera pointed at their face as they navigate content, and then it's measuring where people's gaze is, where their eyes actually roam around a page or around a piece of content. And so there was this cool site that said, well, it's expensive to run eye tracking on real human subjects, but what if we pooled lots and lots of eye tracking data and then using artificial intelligence tried to predict where people would look at any given graphic. So there is a website that is linked here in a second, but for doing that, and we ran this example through that software, and it's basically a predictive algorithm, and it's saying, where people are likely to look on the regular screenshot is they're going to spend a lot of time looking at those hotkeys over on the right, for example, and they're going to look at those middle menu items that are not important and the top menu items. But on the right-hand side with the simplified version, you see that they're looking up here where it says File, and then they're looking at where it says Connect Mobile Device. And that's really the focus that you want them to have, right? So you're doing them a favor by helping to minimize the distracting elements. So this is the URL. If you know, I'd encourage you to take a screenshot of some of your content and upload it. Would be pretty interesting to see, you know, what patterns there are. This is another example, though, using that that Calendly site. So the one on the left, you can see it's not as distinct, but there certainly is a lot more attention given to that left-hand column in the regular screenshot, but in the simplified one, again, the part that is left text, top left, and then that little menu on the right is where a lot of the visual attention goes. And that's actually what you want, right, is you want to help focus people's attention and not have them searching and scanning all over your screenshot, like which part are you even talking about? So these are kind of some high-level concepts of where you might think about employing this in your content. But let's look at some more examples of where other brands are actually doing this out there in the wild. So I referenced Microsoft Edge tips a couple times. What you see here is they have this whole site full of little tips on how to get more value from their browser. And every one of them looks a lot like this, where there's some text below that gives you, you know, kind of what the value is and where to find it. And then it's illustrated by this little animation at the top that is 100% simplified. There's zero text left in the animations at the top. Now that, you know, I think we could debate about whether they kind of went too far, you know, in terms of being able to follow and follow where in the application they are clicking, but you can see how massively scalable this is to any language, and Microsoft supports a lot of languages. This one is from Google's G Suite Learning Center. It seems like they recently updated and posted a lot of new content there. And especially when you look in the Getting Started series, so they'll have like Getting Started with Google Drive or Getting Started with Slides. You'll see that they have these simplified graphics sprinkled throughout to help illustrate, you know, where you should go. And again, it's paired with text to help, you know, here's where to click the down arrow, manage members. Okay, that part's text. And then click an access level, click done. So the most important and salient elements are left in the screenshot, and everything else is sort of abstracted away if it's just distracting noise. This is from a Spanish article, the Dropbox Help Center. And I didn't look at every language, but I looked at Spanish and English, and they had the exact same animation in both, even though it does have a little bit of English in it. But what you're seeing here, you know, again, is showing you this high-level concept of how to synchronize content across devices and across your, you know, different devices on different platforms. We launched a Slack community, and I'll have contact info at the end. Anyone who's interested in joining it, just shoot me an email and I'll invite you. But we've asked people who are part of our SUI Slack community, share what you're working on, share some examples, share where you're running into trouble or you've had great successes in working with this simplified graphic approach. And this one is shared by a technical communicator from Procore, and they shared that, you know, their product UI changes a lot, and so it's been a challenge to use screen content in their documentation because the UI is going to change. So this really future-proofed it for them, and also helps them as they're entering more international markets to be able to have this content, you know, not have to be localized. The visuals not have to be localized. Similarly, a technical communicator from Blackbaud is part of that community and shared that they put together this series of animated GIFs that really show the UX of their report builder tool that they have. And they were finding that users could be a bit overwhelmed by a blank UI when they first open up the product. So this really helped alleviate that and get those users going and demystify the interface for them. So this was like step 2. They had, I think, 3 or 4 of these that showed different key interactions within the interface that would just kind of jumpstart the user. We're using this in our products at TechSmith. So this one has been out there in the wild for actually a few years. This is what you might this is sort of the before and after. So this is what you would get if you did like a literal screenshot and walk someone through the feature. And you can see it's a bit noisy. There's just a lot to be looking at, and you're not always sure where to focus your attention. And when you apply the SUI approach to this, it really helps, again, just focus you on the most important elements. Draw out a selection, hit start, scroll the page, hit stop. Like, that's it. That's really what we're trying to get you to do and understand. And it makes it a lot easier to follow along when it's the very first time that you've seen this UI or this workflow. Cool thing about this is we can, the core of that animation we can use in the German product as well. We can use it on multiple platforms, Windows and Mac. And we've also been able to use it over multiple versions of the product. So even though the functionality or the UI may shift just a little bit, we haven't had to update it because it's abstracted enough. And that's great because those animations take some time to create. So if you can do it in a way that's more future-proof, it definitely helps. Another quick example, so we have the same issue that Blackbaud mentioned, which is when you open up Camtasia, if it opens up to an empty editor, it's pretty overwhelming. So instead, when Camtasia opens for the first time for a customer, they actually see this little project that is a simplified walkthrough of the interface. And this is where I was talking earlier about giving people kind of a mental map or the visual logic of an interface and a process. And that's really what you're going to see here. I'll hit play, and it actually has narration that goes with it.
Right now, you're in the Camtasia editor. The editor is made up of the timeline, where you can arrange and edit your clips, the canvas, which is your video preview, and the tools panel, where your media is stored, along with shapes, animation, effects, and more. At the top of the tools panel, there's a button to launch the Camtasia Recorder, a tool that captures all of the action on your computer screen. When you're done recording, each clip will be placed.
All right, so it goes on for a minute or so, but I just want to point out, as you're looking at this, we were pretty liberal with our reduction of detail. There was a lot of extraneous detail that was abstracted out here, and this little clip just illustrates that. The record area up at the top left, we got rid of a lot of text, and then in this recorder window, we got rid of a lot of text and detail there. Again, to really just help you focus on what you're supposed to do, which is, click record, click start recording, and then go. Trying to break that down and make it simple for folks. Once again, some of these same benefits of clarity and effectiveness, future-proofing the content, and then also dealing with localization costs, definitely a helpful approach for our team. All right, so then you might be asking how. So we've talked a little bit about, with SUI in particular, what is the concept, what are some ways to think about applying it to your content, some examples, and now at a really high level, how would you go about making this kind of content? And I want to start with some just design principles or high-level tips, because these are like mental categories to get you thinking about. I'm not a designer personally myself. I don't have a great design sense, and so when our designers helped break this down for me, it helped a lot as far as like, how do you achieve this result? So first off, thinking about colors. How should you treat colors if you're going to move from text and objects on the screen to these blocks? And the principle here is that you want to have complementary colors that help the user understand, like, oh, okay, I'm in the same application. It doesn't look wildly different in terms of the color palette. Have a small number of colors. You don't have to have every color represented, but you can kind of, again, simplify the number of colors. And then think about where to use contrast. So save contrast for anything that you want to have stand out, and then reduce contrast or even reduce opacity of elements where you want to have it kind of fade into the background because it's less important for understanding. And similarly, when you think about the scale of, or the continuum of simplification, how much do you simplify? How much is too much? So I think a good guiding principle here is you want to remove anything that's clutter, which means it's not helpful for the user to be able to achieve your learning objectives or be able to follow your documentation. But you do want to leave some clues. So for example, you see the logo at the top left of these screenshots, the Calendly logo is there. The top level navigation and the secondary navigation is intact. And then the other part that's not simplified is the focal area, which is the new event type and what some of those event types are. So remove clutter. That's going to be extraneous detail, but leave those clues that help people, one, know where they are in the application, and two, know what it is you're trying to get them to do and steps that they're supposed to follow. Also, and we kind of touched on this before, you know, at least explore or think about being pretty aggressive with your simplification in some cases. So if there's a block of text and it's, 5 lines long, you might be fine just reducing that to 2 or 3 lines. You don't have to replicate every single line of text as another block. So I want to just call back to this. So this was that Microsoft Edge example. When thinking about simplification, again, if you have no text at all, you might really want to sit some users down, do some usability testing, and make sure that they can still follow it and still understand what it is you're trying to show. Because obviously there are some great benefits to this in terms of, reuse in every language and every context. But if you've sacrificed, intelligibility to the point where people can't follow it, then you've gone too far. So I think a good principle here is talk to your own users, get some examples in front of them, and get their feedback on it, and see what their feelings are about this treatment. So at a high level, there's 2 ways to go about creating the SUI effect. One is to take a manual approach, and one is to use automated tools. So let me talk just a little bit about each. So on the manual side, here's what this would look like if you use Illustrator. Maybe you have GIMP. Maybe you have another graphic tool at your disposal. What you would be doing is choosing a tool like the rectangle tool, choose a fill color, and then go through and draw out the boxes over all of the text, get them into alignment, and try to match the height to each other. And you probably, again, want to pick maybe 2 or 3, at most probably 4 colors that you're working with to go through and simplify all these different objects. And then if you have specialized objects you want to represent, you might go find some icons or graphics and bring those in. Here we're just using a circle as a real basic, way to show where those profile pictures were. So that's how you'd go about it in Illustrator. And this is how we used to do it at TechSmith for sure. But we bought in to this idea that this SUI and simplification is really valuable, to the point where we decided to add some features in Snagit that would make this more automated. So in Snagit 2019, you can flip the Auto Simplify switch there that's in the Simplify tool. And what we're doing is using computer vision to recognize all of the text and objects, and then generate a color palette and place all the objects in their respective locations. And then, of course, there are tools that you can go in and select 1 or more of those blocks at a time. So what I'm doing here is I'm going through and selecting chunks, areas of blocks, and deleting them to kind of unsimplify those areas. And then we have a number of tools that are more specialized to represent either lines of text with ragged formatting, or a profile picture or whatever, and you can apply those on top of the image to kind of block out certain kinds of elements. So that was how to make a static image, and then I will just briefly touch on how to go about doing this in an animated setting. So if you were making a quick video or maybe an in-product animation or for onboarding or something, you might want to create something that looks a little bit like this. So this is go over here, click, and then click. What you're seeing is the screen change with every click. Open this menu or dialog, and then click the item in the dialog, right? So just a real quick workflow to kind of show you at a high level what that could look like. So here's how you would go about building something like that. You would have a simplified screenshot showing each of those steps. So you would take the screenshots and then you would use, Illustrator or Snagit or something to make them simplified. You'd also have any elements that kind of appear on top, like this dialog box appears, and then a cursor, because that, is helpful to, obviously, to follow like where the clicking is happening. Then you would need some kind of a video editor. So you could use Camtasia for this for sure, or if you had Premiere or some other multi-track video editor. You start loading these elements on the bottommost track. So if you've used a multi-track editor, you know that the bottom track is kind of going to be at the most far away from the viewer in a sense, and closest to the viewer will be anything that's on an upper track. So here are my simplified images all lined up. Each one has the right duration, 1 second, 4 seconds, 3 seconds, whatever it is. And here's kind of how that would look. And it would change, based on how long each section goes. And then you put the dialogue on top, because that's going to appear later in the video, right? So you can see that kind of floats above the area of the screen that you want. And then you have the cursor that is kind of moving around, and you're having that be the piece that people follow and are engaged with. So the way you do that is you apply these animation points. This is what it would look like in Camtasia. Basically, each little arrow on the timeline there just says, at this moment in time, have this cursor graphic in this location, and then at the next point in time, have it somewhere else. So it's basically sliding around from here over to there, and then to the next place. What we've done in this illustration, you'll notice that there's also this cool little dipping where the cursor seems to shrink and grow, and that is basically just simulating a click. So all it's doing is changing the size. It gets slightly smaller, and then it gets back to its normal size a second later. So that's how we're kind of achieving that visual trickery there to make it look like a click. So it looks complicated, but when you kind of break it down into its elements, it's not too bad to build. And again, once you spend the time to kind of build out these assets and have a workflow for creating them, it's great because once you create one of these animations or videos, it will last a long time and you don't have to keep updating it as often. So just to reiterate sort of the two main points of the presentation here. The first is sharing this evidence, this data that having visuals in your content is actually important for learners and for viewers and for customers because they prefer visual content, because visual content helps them work faster and less with fewer errors, and also their economic incentives or outcomes of having visuals in the content. And then we talked about SUI as one creative solution to approaching some of the core problems of creating visuals, maintaining visuals, localizing visuals, and it is hopefully useful to you in your content. We have some more time for questions. I'll just put this up now because if you're wanting to contact me or take a picture of this, I love talking to folks. Feel free to shoot me an email. And then also, this is where you can get the value of visuals research. And if you have a smartphone, you can actually point it at the screen in camera mode. Just turn on your camera and it will read that QR code and open a link for you. And I can also go into Snagit and show you some more. But first, I want to take any questions that folks have. I know that was kind of a lot of information all at once. Hopefully, you'll have the recording if you want to review it. But is there anything that someone may have occurred to you as a question along the way that you want to ask?
Can you hear me?
Go ahead,
Yeah.
just say your question, I'll repeat.
Yeah, okay. Hi, thanks for a great presentation. It was really helpful. I guess what I'm asking you here to do here might be to predict the future, but so this is a next step evolution that you're showing us with this simplified design, which seems very intuitive and obvious now. What might come next from here?
Well, that's a great question. Part of my job is to be, I guess, an amateur futurist. You know, I don't get fired if my predictions come out wrong, but definitely there's an impact if we take the product in the wrong direction. So I feel like it's hard to know what visual treatment might be next, but I do see that having better ways of creating these animations and videos using the simplified effect, I think that it's still a little harder than it could be. So I would expect to see that some different software tools may try to solve, you know, creating the animated version of the simplified graphic. And I see things like, it's really hard, right? Because I see things like it's an isometric or isomorphic effect where you'll see like this screenshot that's been like severely tilted and laid flat, and you're kind of looking along it as if it's a 3D object. So you'll see some applications like that on the marketing side, where I don't think that they're going to make their way into technical content, because they're such an aggressive graphical treatment that I think it's really hard to have kind of a learning outcome from that graphic, right? It's pretty and it suggests something, but I don't know that it actually can still communicate information about the interface in a way that a technical communicator needs. So that's sort of my mental screen when I think about what people are doing graphically, is that if it has an application for learning and for communicating, you know, the details, then I think it will hold up. Otherwise, I don't think it's going to migrate across from marketing. I don't know if that answers your question at all.
Daniel, could you touch on Fuse and getting getting into mobile?
Yeah. So
briefly.
Sure. Yeah. So let me just well, it's probably easiest actually here if we go to the page. So Fuse is a mobile app that we have that TechSmith created, and its job really is to help move content from a mobile device to Snagit or Camtasia. So if you don't use Snagit or Camtasia, it's probably not going to be the most useful thing for you. Its kind of sister application is called TechSmith Capture, which has been really well received. It's actually newer than Fuse, and TechSmith Capture helps you create screen recording, so videos of what's happening on your mobile device. So if you need to, you know, support a mobile application in your content, and you need to do that as a video, do check out TechSmith Capture. And then TechSmith Fuse is, well, I won't play through all of this, but its job is really to help you move, and you can see actually we kind of have this illustrated version here, but it helps you move content. So the main idea is it's here on your phone, screenshots or photos, and then you can move it into Snagit or Camtasia. And the way it connects is you actually, there's a scanner built into Fuse. You scan a QR code in Snagit or Camtasia, and so it knows how to pair together. And it doesn't even use the internet to move the file back and forth. It actually does it locally over your local Wi-Fi. So you just need to be on the same Wi-Fi network with both your mobile app and your desktop or laptop machine, and then it moves it directly into the product. That's a little bit about Yeah, those mobile apps, and you can find them here. I got here from the products, or it may be just as easy to just Google. That's probably what I should have done in the first place, TechSmith Fuse. There's kind of a nice tutorial that walks through, shows you what it does, and helps you do all of the steps.
Thank you,
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think that you know, I actually have an example here I can go into using a mobile screenshot. If there are other questions, though, I'd be happy to answer those first. But if there aren't, I can show a little bit more inside of Snagit.
Ms. O'Meara has a question.
Yes, so
Could you come up?
it's a technical question with the NAS. When you do the screenshot, can you actually edit the text? The only text is shown in the screenshot. So is there any way you can edit the text, like when you're doing localization, so you can easily switch files to the word that you're trying to use? You have to like put a text box on top of it and write it.
So
Yeah.
O'Meara's asking if you can edit text within Snagit
Yeah, on the
without
screenshot,
having to
the
open
image.
up.
Yeah, once you have the image,
Uh-huh.
if you send it text, the image, and that text can be edited. Because you read it as a CR.
So can text in the image, in the screen capture, be edited using
Yeah.
Snagit?
So yes, it can in Snagit. In Snagit 2019, actually, I think we implemented this in 2018, but it's part of Snagit 2019. So I'll show you. This was a screenshot that I took from Venmo earlier on my device. So and I brought it using Fuse. I brought it over into Snagit. So I'm here in Snagit, and I just used the selection tool to select some text, and then right-click and say Edit Text. So again, this is using that computer vision technology. It identified the text. It applied OCR, optical character recognition, to identify what the actual text characters are. And let me zoom in a bit because that's pretty small to see.
That's great.
And then when I selected it and applied that edit text, it made it editable. Now you can see that we, made a guess at the color and font size and which font, and I'll probably need to go in here and tweak it a little bit. But yeah, it actually is. I can change it to something else.
Mhm.
So yes, you can do that in Snagit. And the other thing to notice is that it also filled in the background. So it actually, what it actually does is it Snagit is, and I'll show you again here on another piece of text. So it's actually deleting out that section, removing it, filling in the background, and then reimposing the text on top. So I don't want to get super deep in the weeds here, but let me just hint to you that if I have a screenshot like this, for example, and I only have, I've already simplified out, these sections, and I only have a little bit of text left, I can actually go in here, make this real text, get the right size and font and everything. And probably if it's your application, you'll know exactly, what font size and what font it is, et cetera. So that's pretty easy. And then, again, I don't want to go too deep in the weeds here for everyone in the audience, but if I go over to the library, let me go back to my recent captures. I think I could get to it from a different menu. Probably would have been easier to show you that way, but I'm used to going to my library. So if I go here in the library and I've selected, that's the screenshot that I just had, and do translate, what this is going to actually do is extract any editable text. So anything that's a text object, and that would include any callouts or captions that I put on top, and it would include that text that I just made a text box. and it will pull that into an XLIF file. So if you do localization, you know about XLIF files. It puts that into an XLIF file. You send that off to your translation team. They send it back with the translated text, and then you import that back into Snagit, and it duplicates this screenshot, which currently has English, and it injects like the German or the French or the Russian text in here. So you can actually automate, or I would say semi-automate, localization of simplified content this way.
Thank you.
But also, you can just use this to make a quick modification. So, maybe there's a misspelling on the screen, or your interface got updated and now the text label is, 3 characters different. Don't retake your whole screenshot. Just go in and kind of repair it. Does that help?
Yes, a lot. Very useful. Any other questions online? Well, we have a surprise. So for those of you that made the effort to come in person to our first satellite community event, we are going to, thanks to the generosity of TechSmith, offer a free bundle of Camtasia and Snag. And so what we're going to, this is the way we're going to do it, and we're going to offer it to, we have people on Long Island. So Donna, if you could text me the names of the people who were there, and I certainly have the names of the people who are online. Each person, just write your name and your email.
Thank you.
And we're going to ask Vanessa, did you text me the names, Donna? Donna?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, yeah, could you text me the names of the people who are there with you?
Absolutely.
There's you, Francis, who's the other person?
Miriam Salmasian. Oh,
Okay. Yeah, please text. And I would appreciate it if you could fold up the paper. And we're going to ask Vanessa. So I've written the names of the people who are online. It looks like we lost Ed Marsh. Daniel, I'm not, you're aware of the storm that went through here and I guess is continuing to go through, which likely scared a lot of people. Oops.
Yeah, we've had some pretty extreme weather recently, huh?
Yeah.
I was down in Atlanta this last weekend, and they were just amazingly heavy downpours.
So what I would like to do is offer 2 bundles, because we did have people here in New York and we have people on Long Island. Will that work for TechSmith?
Let's do it. Yeah,
Okay.
let's do it.
Okay, so I got everybody's names except mine in here, and Vanessa, will you kindly pick 2?
Okay.
Vanessa is the Microsoft rep.
And the person is Paula Valentine.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Joy
Joyce
Santarella.
Joyce Santarella. So we have two winners. How about that?
Why,
Okay,
thank you.
so you're very welcome. Again, thanks. So I'd like to get some feedback from those people online and the people here in the room and in Long Island as to your perceptions about what went well, what could be improved. I'd like to hear from people here in New York. What went well? Okay.
One of the things that Ed texted me is you could hear people typing, you weren't muted. So, you know.
This is Donna in the Roosevelt Hill Mall. I just want to say that the venue is just fantastic here. It's so convenient to get to for all of our tech companies in this area here. It's a great place, it's a great venue, and we have great visibility. We have a beautiful Flash store here. We have people just walking by in the stores and then looking in, trying to figure out what we're up to in here.
Thank you. What I would appreciate is if you could email me your feedback, and we're going to make the slides available, right, Daniel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say I'm happy to do it however you want. If folks want to email me, I'll send the slides. Winners, can you email me because I don't have your contact information, and I will send you the keys to snag it in Camtasia. It's a
What I'll do, Daniel, is my intention is to draw attention to our newly redesigned STC New York Metro website, and we'll create a page there with the recording as well as the slides and your contact information. Donna, Joyce, if you could send us a photo, and we'll take a picture of the winning entry over here with Paula and the group. It would be
great to see your setup. How you've got the Microsoft stores there. It would be I would love to see that too.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, I would like to say thank you to Microsoft for this great venue and for their hospitality in general. I think it's really
Yes. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. All right, everyone. Stay tuned for more information on our STC New York Metro .org website. We have a number of volunteer opportunities available. If you're into or would like to learn more how to apply your writing skills, your visualization skills in web redesign, we are at phase 1 of the web redesign project and entering into phase 2. So we're looking for volunteers to assist with that effort. We also have the competition, regional competition, which is coming up in the fall. We'll be announcing more about that. And we're also looking for judges. So if you've been in the profession for some time, so you can speak to Paula to get more information, but the contact for the competition is Malou Schloss, and we're going to make more information available about that. We do have several upcoming events. One of the trends that I pointed out earlier is data visualization. Big data analytics is huge in New York, from financial services, health services, life sciences, professional services, education, government. There is a lot of information, and visualizing that information to make it easier for people to understand, comprehend, and gain insights from in order to make decisions is a really booming area for tech comm professionals. So it's what we want to do is engage with the community to help professionals gain the skills and master the areas where they can be major contributors towards realizing this trend. So thank you again, everyone, for attending, and stay tuned for more information. Have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks so much for the opportunity. Good night, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.